It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
You want something, go get it, period.
You gotta keep moving, let's go. Don't quit until you got nothing left.
This is where we have been, this is how we got here, this is who we are.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
You're listening to the Hustle Indy Show, where we seek out some of Indy's most hustling people and places to learn about what they do, how they got started, and where they're going. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the 6th episode of the Hustle Indy Show. We decided to switch it up a little bit for this intro.
Yeah. We are recording it on a different day, obviously, by our outfits, as you'll see. And we decided to change the camera angle. And so last season we recorded 12 episodes, and we just realized that we're on episode 6.
We're halfway done. If we're on track for the same amount of episodes, we're halfway done with this season, which is crazy.
I didn't even realize it's so fast. It
really
has
is.
Just gone by so fast.
Well, you get these people in and you get so caught up in like how awesome their stories are, learning more about their company, their business, and their ventures, and like next thing you know, you've got 6 people you've already interviewed, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah. And this was one of my favorites that we've done this season so far, just because of basically the impact that they're having on this city and what we enjoy about the city so much. They're the ones, promoting that and really actually plugging it in. And I just love what they've been able to do.
Definitely.
I guess we should name who they are. So we're interviewing the current president of the IndyHub,
Blake Johnson.
And his story of what just they're doing to impact the city has been inspirational. I'm already looking to get more involved in what they're doing personally, just because their outreach to newcomers and the people that have been here alike, and just plugging them into the city, getting them integrated into what the city's all about and the people that are already here is just really, really cool.
No, yeah. I mean, I feel like every episode we talk about, it's our favorite episode.
Yeah.
So, but no, really, this one was really special because they actually have such a other people-centered mission. They want to get people into Indianapolis and help them in any way possible. And just hearing his heart as the president behind all of that and just the way that they're going about driving all of this, it was just super cool to hear a lot of the behind-the-scenes thinking for IndyHub and what they're doing. Absolutely love this episode. It was very inspirational. It brought awareness to a lot of things that a lot of people are suffering with that maybe we don't recognize. And so it was really cool to learn about some of the things that they're considering as they're making decisions. This was just, again, a phenomenal episode to learn more about IndyHub, to highlight their heart and their passion behind what they're doing.
Yeah. So once you listen to this episode, definitely go and check them out, the IndyHub, and we'll see what they're all about after you listen to this episode. I think you'll kind of understand what we're talking about. So without further ado,
let's get right into it.
Let's jump into it.
All right, well, for today's episode of the Hustle Indy Show, we have quite an amazing guest. We've got Blake Johnson, who is a state representative for Indiana and the president of IndyHub. So, Blake, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
How are you doing today?
I am great. We are
busy?
Another week down here.
Yes.
We're getting moving along
the
here.
The weeks blend together, the days blend together.
That's right. Time means nothing, right?
Exactly. So tell us a little bit about your role with, we'll start with IndyHub. Tell us a little bit about IndyHub and your role with IndyHub specifically.
Sure. So IndyHub's an organization that's been around for 15 years. So we're not new. We're a teenager organization in a lot of ways. Our focus is entirely on helping people get connected, involved, and making a difference in the city. And we focus heavily on 20 and 30-somethings, but really, at the end of the day, it's just about making Indianapolis the most welcoming and empowering city we can possibly have. So we do everything from social events, fun things for someone who might be new to the city or just looking to kind of meet new people. We do volunteerism events and opportunities for folks to kind of hone their skills, to ensure they can make a greater impact in the city. And we do a lot of leadership development as well, channeling people into opportunities to make a difference. So whether you're someone who's brand new to the city, you've been here forever, or you're just looking to get more plugged in, we kind of have a role that we play in all of that.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So what's your specific role amongst all of that big umbrella of stuff?
Sure. So I've been the president of IndyHub for a little over 2 years now.
Okay.
And my role is, I mean, obviously some of the stuff you expect from a chief executive, right? So managing the team and helping set strategy and all of that. But I also have the privilege of being kind of like the chief spokesperson, chief cheerleader for the organization in the city, right? So spend a lot of time helping people kind of understand what makes Indianapolis a great place to live, work, play, plant roots, and out meeting with different partners to bring them into the fold. I mean, what's great about Indianapolis, we're really a community that you're just 2 degrees separated from anybody, right? We're a big city, but we have that kind of small town charm in a lot of ways. So I love being in a role where, we're focused so heavily on connecting people to each other, to opportunities, to other organizations. And so most of my day is spent doing that.
You said so. You said that a lot of the focus is on connecting people, and a lot of it surrounds itself around that, bridging the gap and making stuff like that happen. Practically, what does that look like? Like events, what do those look like?
Sure.
Structurally, what does that look like?
So a couple things to think about even before that, right? So some of the challenges that we face. Each year, over 1 million 20 and 30-somethings pack up and move. And they are picking cities based on a lot of things. Obviously, if they get a job, they're going to go to where the job is.
Right.
But they're also making the choice based on whether the community feels right, whether it's a place they could see themselves living in. So we're constantly thinking about, for that portion of the million that land in Indianapolis, what are we doing to make sure that they feel like this is home? The second thing to know is that when someone arrives here for the first time, we have about 90 days to get them meaningfully connected. Otherwise, they already start thinking they made a mistake and that they should be somewhere else. And the last piece is a study came out in 2018 from Cigna Health that said half of Americans feel lonely some or all of the time. Okay, so this was 2018. It's before the pandemic.
Yeah.
This is before we were all like retreating into our homes. And so we know loneliness is a big challenge. We know the number's higher for millennials and even higher for Gen Z. So we're constantly thinking about those couple of things as why the work matters. And so for events, like I said, there could be social fun stuff. So we might do a night at a museum or at a theater, or we might do a happy hour at a new restaurant. But we also will do a workshop on what it means to plan your financial giving and impact for a year, or workshops on mental health and wellness, or cocktail classes, or cooking classes. I mean, so anything you can think of that would make a city feel a little bit more like home, help you introduce to people, help you grow personally and professionally. We kind of play in all those sandboxes. But one thing I want to share in particular that we do that I've always loved is an initiative called Meet Indy. And as long as we've been around, if you were someone who wanted to get connected, you might reach out to us, or your boss or employer might reach out to us. And just say, hey, I got this person. They're great. We need to help them get plugged in. And so somebody from our team would sit down and have a cup of coffee with that person, get to know them, find out what they're interested in, and then make a bunch of connections. So I might introduce you to 2 people and then point you in the direction of an organization that matches your passions and interests. So we've done that forever. When I came on board, come to find out, the staff, we were a staff of 4 people. That's a lot of those. There's a lot of those meetings happening every year with a very small team. I think at one point, we had one person who did 200 of them in 1 year.
Wow!
And so we've got something kind of dynamite here, and we really need to blow this out of the water. So what Meet Indy does is we've recruited over 20 city ambassadors, people from every sector, all kinds of different experiences here in the community: transplants, lifers, folks who've come home after being away. And now we've deployed them. So we hear that person's name, we reach out and we say, hey, Brendan, we think you're going to really love Indianapolis. We want to help make sure that happens. Would you fill out this quick survey? That survey, we go through and ask some questions about the things you care about, connect you to the right city ambassador for a cup of coffee, a beer, or in these days, a Zoom, and sit down and have a conversation, and then do that. Intentional connections to different things. So we're in all these other cities around the country, where if you're brand new, you're on your own. It's networking as an adult sucks. And so like all this stuff is happening. But in Indianapolis, we're about onboarding you to the community, making it natural, easy, organic. And at the end of the day, making sure that you feel that 2 degrees of separation, that you feel like this is home. And more than that this is the place you want to stick around in, because that's got to be our goal across the board.
That's awesome.
And I can probably speak for both of us here, but as we're both freshly out of college, within the past couple of years, it is very difficult out of college to initiate a connection with other people outside of, okay, now I got a job, now I just connect with these people in my job. I think what you're doing is you're being able to just like open up the field to, you have the whole city at your fingertips. Let's actually utilize that. And how have you practically done that with So with this Meet Indy, you have this team. How do you pick those people, and how does like that scheduling work for that? Because I feel like that could be kind of a chaotic thing. Is hey, you have all these people coming through. How do you connect them with the right people? How do you actually pair them when it comes to those meetings?
Yeah, so I mean, if you imagine that you're someone who comes in and says, one of the things I love about the city is sports, right?
Yeah.
I'm really into sports. I want to find ways to get more plugged into that. We would probably connect you to a volunteer from Sports Corp or one of the sports teams,
okay.
right? So, I mean, it really is one-to-one interests,
awesome.
passions to an individual who's living that stuff. Because at the end of the day, I think we all know that life is more fulfilling when you get to do stuff that you actually have a connection to your passions and your interests, right? And so our goal is to make living in this city an easy connection to passion and interest. And those city ambassadors are designed to do that. Now, so mechanically, you know, there's some magic to it, right? Like, I mean, the way technology works today, lots of automated things that we can kind of make it all work. But at the end of the day, it's an outreach from a person, a real live person saying, I want to be a part of making this city feel like home for you. Let's get together and make it happen.
I love that. I love that. So I do have a couple different questions. So for you specifically, and maybe for IndyHub in general, what has been the like inspiration behind that? So you definitely want to connect it and make it grow. What inspires you to actually continue to do that? Because that is something that I feel like could be very tiresome and maybe sometimes not rewarding when people end up not being connected after you meet with them. And so how do you keep going?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, it's a couple of things for me, I think, that kind of animate the reason I do this, right? The reason like I kind of wake up excited to help get people connected, involved, and making a difference. Like, so when I was a kid, I was a weird kid. I was a really weird kid, and like the kind of kid that you go in the cafeteria and he's probably sitting by himself. And so I never really felt like I fit in. It was a very normal thing for me.
Sure.
And I remember a guy named Jerry Brown, who I'm still friends with today, like middle school, right? Toughest time of your life, it seems. Came into the cafeteria, sat down across from me, and just like befriended me, right? No reason to. He was older than me, all that kind of stuff. We ended up becoming, you know, thick as thieves, started a band together, spent most of my like formative years hanging out with Jerry and another group of guys. And I think in that kind of relationship, especially when you get into the band and whatnot, that was the first time in my life that I felt, I think, really pure sense of belonging, you know? And I think that is the most powerful feeling when you really feel like you belong somewhere, right? Whether it's in a job, it's in a personal relationship, if it's in a community, then if you can really feel that way in a community, it's a powerful thing. And so I think I'm always still just really amped up about that feeling of belonging and wanting to make sure everyone gets it, right? I mean, it's one of those things that it's in a lot of ways indescribable, but once you experience it, you know it. And the moment someone in a city like ours really feels like they belong, the stuff that they're capable of accomplishing is exponentially higher, right?
Yeah.
It's limitless. Because when you feel like you belong, you take ownership too, right?
Yeah.
And you're invested in your neighborhood. You don't want to see the street curbs get covered in muck. You clean them out so that the water drains. You get involved in your neighborhood group.
Sure.
You start volunteering at a local food bank because it's not anymore. It's not just a city you live in. It's your city. And that's all we're striving for every single day.
What have been some of the biggest challenges in bridging some of those gaps, making those connections, and kind of just overcoming that barrier?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is it came this year, right? I mean, it's our work's pretty fun because it's like convince people to come out and meet each other, and then trying to move them through a sequence of events where it goes from like kind of top of funnel, having a good time, to making a difference and being a part of being a leader here. But this year that's been different because, you know, right around March, the idea of getting together in person wasn't so safe. You know, the idea of hosting an event for a couple hundred people no longer was on the table. And so the challenge this year was to make a pivot that said we can still create sense of belonging. We can still create connection without violating any norms and doing anything that's unsafe. And so we launched a book club series this year that time and time again just sold out because people were looking for a meaningful conversation. You know, it's not like traditional. It's not like going to a bar and meeting someone. It's like sitting down around a book and really kind of diving in and getting to know one another on a really deep and personal level. I think that was successful. We hosted a virtual dinner party. We hosted different events that were about kind of growing in terms of your financial wellness. And so throughout that time, we tried to find a way to utilize the technology to still build that sense of belonging connection. It hasn't been easy, but at the end of the day, it's also been super necessary. I am so proud of the work we've done in 2020 in particular, because it would have been very easy just to slow down and say, okay, we gotta figure out a way to weather the storm. But instead, we put the pedal to the metal and served more people than we ever have before. I think if you look at 2019, we hosted, and while the data may be kind of boring, but it's worth saying. In 2019, we hosted 45 experiences total for the year, and we reached roughly 6,500 to 7,500 people, depending on what you count, right? If you look at video views and stuff like that, we didn't do a whole lot of video in 2019. In 2020, we made all these pivots, and we did over 200 experiences.
Wow!
So same amount of staff.
Holy.
We didn't have more money, but we spent all that time doing over 200 experiences, and we reached 86,000 participants.
Oh, wow.
And I think it's not, listen, IndyHub's great, and we do awesome stuff, and I'm incredibly proud of it. But it's not necessarily just IndyHub, right? I mean, that's a reaction to a very significant need, which was we all felt a little isolated. We all felt a little uncertain about what the world was throwing at us. We still do, right? And so finding connections with people who could share that experience with you, but also continue to move forward. I mean, I think that was the sweet spot, and I think that's why we had so much success in the past year.
That's awesome. What have been some of those, you mentioned Zoom, what have been some of those technologies that have really kind of partnered well with your mission and your organization?
Yeah, I mean, we have used the hell out of Zoom and Google Meet for sure, and that's been great. And both those technologies have kind of grown throughout the period of the pandemic too, to do new things. Yeah. We use Webinar Jam to host like kind of major events in partnership with some great organizations. Innovative, actually, who's down here in Fountain Square as well, worked with us on that. Facebook was a great mechanism. We used Facebook groups. We've obviously we got group texts, and I'm trying to think, house party, and anything that was on the table. I think you would have seen our members and participants using.
That's awesome.
But at the end of the day, also there was also, I think, a push on our team side and the people that work with us really closely just to be reaching out to folks and checking in. I don't know how many like Zoom happy hours I've done, or like nights with friends, where we tried to find a way to make something kind of feel normal. But at the end of the day, we wanted to be a conduit for that, and I think that worked. And I like to think that across the board of all these people we've served, there are so many people who made new friends in a time when it really was hard to do so.
So do you keep track of like how many like IndyHub members you guys have, and do you follow up with them pretty regularly?
Yeah. So right now, I think we talk about members. So there's no membership fee or anything like that. But our members are people who we have some kind of like tie to, right?
Gotcha.
So whether that's the e-newsletter, right, that we send out, or our social media following, or registrants to events, right? So there's some overlap across those. So right now our network's at 55,000 people.
Wow, that's awesome.
And it grows every year. So it's up 5,000 people this year.
That's awesome,
man.
And so we are in constant communication. I think a lot of nonprofits will send you an email every week or every couple of days, and we don't do that. We curate a very specific e-newsletter once a month that kind of gives you everything you need for that month. And then our social media is really, really active. I mean, I think we're at 28,000 people on Twitter.
Wow.
We've got a pretty large following, and again, it speaks to 15 years of working really hard to be the hub. But it also speaks to just how much people strive for connection. They care about being connected to other people, and in a city like ours, it's powerful capital too, right? Because as soon as you're connected, you can really accomplish anything you want to do here.
Yeah. So speaking to Indianapolis specifically, I know you have personally some more ties to the government and to what's going on in Indianapolis specifically. In what ways have you seen kind of IndyHub coexist with the city itself? And what ways have they meshed together, made partnerships like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's both formal and informal, right? I mean, we have a senior leader from the mayor's team on our board of directors. We have senior leaders from Visit Indy, the Indy Chamber, CICP, the Arts Council, all serving on our board of directors. We have major corporations that take a leadership role in our organization as well. Our mission is to support the missions of all those organizations too, right? We want this to be the kind of city you want to visit. We want this to be the kind of city you want to live in. And so in a lot of ways, there's not much separation at all. We are consistently working to help ensure that this city accomplishes and becomes everything it can become. And we get a front row seat to it. And again, back to the whole idea of 2 degrees, right? This is one of the things I love about Indianapolis. And I didn't grow up here. I mean, I'm a transplant. And
where are you originally from?
So I'm from Delaware County, Muncie, Indiana.
Oh, okay.
That's where I grew up. I actually grew up in Daleville, Indiana, but very few people know Daleville.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, in this city, if you want to get something done, you can get a seat at the table. And as a young person, Still pretty young, I hope. The opportunities are pretty limitless. So I always say that in this city, if you want a seat at the table, we'll pull up a seat. If the table's not working the way it should be, we'll help you flip it over. And sometimes we'll even help you just build a brand new table that you can sit at the head of. And I think it's a lived experience for a lot of young people here that's the reality. And I think that sets us apart in a lot of big ways.
So from the inside looking in, metaphorically, do you see a lot of crossover with that same mission from people that are state representatives and working inside the government? Do you see a lot of similar mission behind the things that they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, I think, I served up until I was in the State House. I was a member of the city council here. And in my last little bit of time in the council, we had just elected a new cohort of folks. A third of them were millennials, right?
Wow.
And so talk about young people taking a role of influence. I mean, that's a pretty big jump. And it wasn't just one party or the other. Like both parties, young people took over in a lot of ways. And there, I think those missions were aligned, right? Like, what do we do to make this a great place to live? I mean, I think that's government's role should be, what can we do to make life better for the people who call this community home? And so, and I think that's true at the State House too. I mean, the issues are a little higher up, right? And they're a little less granular. But we're talking about issues of what it takes to make this a talent hub. What does it take to make life a little easier in a time of great struggle? And so we are, those are conversations that are happening every single day.
Very cool. You had mentioned kind of starting out, not, with more like fun activities and getting people involved, but what do like the leadership roles that you had earlier mentioned, what are those and how do people get involved in those?
So it's important to think of us really as a hub, right? So we obviously do a lot of stuff to develop leaders on our own, right? So we have a leadership development program called the 1828 Project. Okay. We have different, courses and workshops we provide throughout the year. But our goal is really to be a channel to other opportunities to lead, right? So, and it's really based on what you're interested in, right? So if you really are passionate about the arts, our goal is probably to try to find a way to get you on a board or into a committee where you're playing a role in that space for the city. If you're interested in government, right, it's our opportunity to kind of send you to the boards and commissions that are making decisions every single day for city government. It's
right.
It's about getting you into a volunteer role that's aligned to your passion. And so, while we obviously find and develop opportunities in our own right, we really like to see people land with partner organizations and make a difference that way. In fact, one of the first times I formally did something with IndyHub is when I was a city councilor and there was a panel on running for office. And so Molly Chavers at the time, who's my predecessor as president of the organization, she hosted a panel with me and a few other folks who'd all run for office to talk about that experience. And again, that's a skill building experience, right? It's not about like taking a leadership role at IndyHub. It's about what skills do I need that I can consider taking this next step in my kind of personal, professional, civic life.
Yeah, that's very cool.
I love that. So does IndyHub specific, is there anything like this in other cities that you guys either feed off of or maybe copy off of or ever pair with? Or is IndyHub pretty unique in what it does?
No one's like IndyHub. But and no other cities like Indianapolis.
Right.
And a lot of people say that.
Very true.
But it's actually true. I mean, my friends from New York City, from Los Angeles, when they come here, Chicago, they come and visit Indy. They initially have their noses up, right?
Yep.
And it's pretty obnoxious. But then you get 24 hours in and they're like, okay, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Like, the people, the places, all the things a big city needs to have the texture that people enjoy. Like, we got it, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And I think that kind of interconnectivity that we all have is really special too. And so they see that and they get it. But to the question, I mean, there are other cities that definitely prioritize getting young people connected and involved. I don't think anybody does the Meet Indy thing that we do. This kind of like concierge level connection to community, focused on you as a person. I mean, that's like, there are companies that are trying to do that, right? In terms of their own onboarding, and we do it as a city. But yeah, I mean, we do look to some other communities and occasionally borrow from one another. But in terms of the cities that people need to land in, it's definitely all million of those people should be landing here.
Yeah,
I love that.
So when you guys are looking to like start up new things, I mean, you're growing tremendously fast right now, especially now more than ever. But over the last years, you've mentioned that you've seen tremendous growth. In what ways are you guys able to kind of build the foundation to keep that going? Like, what are some of the big helping hands that kind of step in terms of funding financially, but also in like structurally? Like, in what ways do you get that kind of help from around the
Yeah,
city?
that's a great
Yeah,
question.
and for people out there, what I guess is the source of your funding, and how do you pay your employees
Sure.
and things like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so IndyHub's funded significantly by corporate partners, right?
Okay, cool.
So the employers across this city who think that talent matters and that want to make sure their talent want to stick around, they invest pretty heavily in us. Over the years, the city itself has invested in us. Obviously, different civic organizations do as well. We do have grant funding as well throughout the years. The Lilly Endowment, Central Indiana Community Foundation. Others have supported us. Fairbanks, many others have been a part of the organization. And then, now we're also individual giving has been a part of it. 15 years in, we got a lot of folks who, for lack of a better term, have aged out, right? They're no longer in their 20s and 30s, but they benefited greatly from the organization. So we've reached out to them.
Cool,
and
cool.
in this last year, we had our largest individual giving year we've ever had.
Wow.
Which is really something considering that
Yeah.
individual giving kind of went down in 2020.
Yeah.
But, folks were still stepping up and supporting us
awesome.
and being a part of the work.
That's
I think
really cool.
people, I would assume, do that. I mean, unfortunately, there's been such an increase in, like you had mentioned earlier, the loneliness or the drug increase, suicide watch. Everything has been increasing because of these lockdowns, and people are probably seeing the importance of what you guys do, and not only just like, oh, let's get out there and have fun and become leadership, but also for like the mental stability of just having other people around you. So like what you do is seems to be way more impactful on just an individual level than just businesses needing talent. You're actually really impacting individuals' lives.
Well, it's crazy because I think it's been more recently that people see loneliness as a public health crisis, and it really is. That Cigna study I mentioned before also laid out that the effect of chronic loneliness is equal to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So the impact on your body, on your blood vessels, on your heart, and it's all pretty serious.
Sure.
And so we see that as something that we have to be involved in, that we have to be solving for, and especially in a time when we're feeling separated.
Definitely.
And the thing is, we're going into winter now, right? I mean, these days are getting a little cold. It's a little harder to hang outside with friends.
Very much so.
And so we got to keep ramping up until we're on the other side of this, and we can all be together in person again.
Yeah. So with all of the loneliness, all of the suicide stuff, all of that happening, do you, from your position and your organization, do you guys feel the weight of that?
100%. 100%. And I think that's why you'll see over the next month or so us leaning in even further on mental health and wellness, on issues of loneliness, on issues of feeling just kind of at the end of your rope. I think one thing that's good about our generation is that we're not as, I don't think we react to the stigma of mental health quite the way generations ahead of us did.
Agreed. Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for that, but at the end of the day, like, I think we know that struggle is real, that depression is an illness. I mean, we know all of this, and so we want to make sure that folks have the resources and tools to recognize when they really are at the end of their rope, and when they need to seek a little bit of extra help or to reach out for a helping hand. And so you'll see us lean in pretty heavily on that over the course of these winter months, because, as I mentioned, these are the months that I think are going to be the hardest. I mean, there's some of you step outside and get the warm sun on your face. It's good for you, and this winter is going to be a little tough. And so I think we're all hands on deck at this point, thinking about the ways that we can ensure that folks feel supported, empowered, and be able to utilize the network we've built to make sure folks have a support system.
Very cool.
And I want to talk about kind of moving forward. So this past year, you said you utilized a lot of like the Zoom and all of these different types of technologies. Moving forward into this year, everything going well, is potentially getting back into in-person, at work and things like that. How is that going to affect what you guys are currently doing? And like, what are your plans for moving forward in the near future and potentially down the road? Yeah,
that's a great question. I think at some level, I think our team would probably like to think that we'd be able to slow down a little bit, but unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. I mean, I think, so say tomorrow, everything's solved, everybody's vaccinated, we're all in a good place, and we can do some in-person events. I don't think the digital component's going to go anywhere.
Gotcha.
I mean, the power of live streaming, the power of video, we already knew that, but I think now we are 100% aware, and so those components are going to remain. The number of people we've been able to reach that couldn't come down to an event downtown after work, but could log on and still get a piece of the conversation, we'll be continuing to lean into that. I think I hope that all of us are going to take from this experience some important learnings about what it means to utilize technology, what it means to throw open the doors for folks to be able to participate, and to ensure that that this wasn't an exercise in vanity, but an exercise in true utility and making things work better.
Mm-hmm. So what things, we've had conversations with several other guests on the show amidst the middle of the pandemic and through all of this, and talked about technology and its role in it. Do you think that the technology and the online platform and the digital stuff is able to fully replace a lot of the things that you're able to do, or is it only a supplement?
Yeah, it's only a supplement.
Okay.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, and when we all feel this, right? I mean, like I said, I've been doing Zoom evenings with my friends, or reestablishing a love for video games late night with my friends. And that all does something, but then I'll tell you, and I'll just speak specifically to a Fountain Square resident, my buddy Anson, who lives over here. We would talk all the time. We're texting all day. We're doing Zoom beers and playing video games. Whatnot. And the first time I saw Anson in real life again, I was like, oh my God, like this feels kind of crazy, doesn't it? Just the way we interact with each other, when you look into somebody's eyes, like all that stuff, the kind of interpersonal connection stuff it's like, it's not as explicit, but it's kind of implicit. Man, I tell you, that's something we're all missing. And, I've read a couple articles, and in fact, in our most recent newsletter, which you can go sign up for at IndyHub.org, we actually highlighted one of these articles that, there's this weird parallel between right now and 1920, right? So you had a pandemic, you had all this kind of economic uncertainty and crisis hit, and then you went into the 1920s, and it gave way to this time of resurgent optimism, to human connection, to celebration, to levity. And I think it's very likely that we see the same thing happen now, right? That the minute we can all be out together at a live music event and do so safely, or go out to dinner with a bunch of friends, or be just walking around downtown and checking out Bottle Works and all this stuff. That moment's going to be very special for everyone, and I think we're going to all want to just do it as much as we possibly can. So I think it's going to be good for the economy. It's going to be good for human connection. It's going to be good for sense of community. And damn, I can't wait. I'm so ready.
Not alone.
So ready. So ready.
So throughout your 2 years, you kind of mentioned a specific example with one of your friends, but has there been any ultra rewarding moment, or either a partnership with a company or a specific individual that has really stood out to you as man, this is the reason that I'm doing this?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a mistake for me to name one person, because I think that we've seen so many, and so many of these stories have been so powerful. But I will say that anytime someone new arrived, right? Like every single time we had a new arrival to the city and we got to play a role with that, that is incredibly empowering. Because again, you think about loneliness, like showing up, and there's a young man, and I won't put him on blast here, but came into town from out of state, no family, no friends, nothing. Hadn't got a great job offer here, decided to make it happen. And that's a tough thing to do. I'm an incredibly sociable guy. I can make friends with anybody, and that would be a lot. And we got to kind of help him maneuver a little bit, introduce him to some folks. I even got to take him to I remember I had access to a suite ticket to a concert. And I took him to a concert over at Banker's Life, one of his first weeks here. And,
that's awesome.
Then he went on to go to our leadership development program. And I mean, so I think of him because he's the perfect example, right? Comes here knowing nobody, just got a job. We start to move him through a process to now where he's going through a leadership development program and playing a role in the conversations that are shaping the future of the city for generations. That's what you want. Because I'm guessing that him in particular, he's feeling pretty bought in now. He's feeling pretty much like he's got that sense of belonging that I said we're all searching for. And that's rad. That's what makes this all totally worth it.
What have been some of the biggest lessons that you personally have learned from your time at IndyHub, but also with other experiences along these last few years?
Sure. Actually, I'll go a little further back than that. I mean, I think so much of what defines, the way any of us operate is kind of embedded in us pretty early on. And so I always tell a story. Both my grandparents were really involved in politics as well. And so my grandmother was a town councilwoman for 30 years.
Wow.
My grandfather ran for sheriff of Delaware County and was a state trooper police officer. Wow. And I spent every single weekend with him. But on Sundays, I go to church with him. And my grandfather and grandmother both always, from as early as I can remember, I could have been 5 or 6 years old, put me at the front door of the church and said my job was to open the door for everyone to make sure they felt welcome.
That's awesome.
Every single Sunday. And so probably from the time I was 5 or 6 until I was 13 and miserably thinking I was so much cooler than doing that task. I did that. And I think I always say that that's probably the thing that has shaped my entire career is that the idea of opening doors, like that it's got to be, it's always a part of what I've done every single step along the way. I was a middle school teacher, and it was about opening doors for my students, right? About making sure they could see the full potential of what they could accomplish if they would, get real inspired about reading and writing, right? That was the first gig, and then being on the city council was opening doors of opportunity for every single person that calls the city home. And I worked in higher ed. It's the same kind of thing. I mean, a college degree can be a huge moment for someone to really kind of set their life on a new trajectory. So I worked in that space. And then now I've kind of got the perfect mix where I get to do the government stuff at the State House and focus on opening doors that way. But then I'm literally a part of a team that is throwing open the doors of this city in a really meaningful and powerful way to people. And my hope is that someone comes to our experience from beginning to end, and they truly think that Indianapolis is the most welcoming city they could have possibly imagined. And that's not that we don't have more work to do, because we do, right? There are people that make this city seem very monolithic, and we got a lot of work to do to make sure that we are opening those doors equitably for every single person. And IndyHub's playing a role in that too, and making sure that we're speaking up when we need to speak up, and ensuring that we're reaching out to all types of communities, all types of backgrounds and walks of life. Because we can think we're doing a great job, but if we're not doing it for everybody, we're not there yet. And so I will always say that IndyHub is really doing an extraordinary job. We're doing work that really matters, but we've got a long road ahead of us to be doing it exactly the way we need to be doing it.
So whether it's for you personally or for IndyHub, in the next, let's just say 5 years or so, how do you see IndyHub or you personally like growing? What are your goals do you have to achieve for IndyHub? Whether it's just pure numbers getting people through, or is there any other program that you're looking to add, or what does the future look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's tough right now because coming out of 2020, I'm kind of just like, we need to keep doubling down on the stuff that we know is working.
Gotcha.
But I will say a success for me is that we'll have we'll have young leaders in every single segment of the city's kind of infrastructure. So whether that's on nonprofit boards, do our nonprofit boards have a fair representation of young people involved in them helping make decisions? Does our government do that in a way that's meaningful? Is it true in our corporate sphere that we're seeing young people elevated in a way that has their voices being heard on issues of great importance? And so for me, the outcome's not really IndyHub growth. It's not how good IndyHub looks. It's really about, do we have a lot of young people in roles where our city is not just being shaped, but it's being forged in a meaningful way by our generation? Because at this point, we're the largest part of the labor market. Our spending is a major driver of economic growth for communities, and quite frankly, our generation is really, really well equipped to lead with compassion, with a sense of collaboration and looking to solve problems rather than just retreating to corners and talking. And I think so many of the problems we see in the world right now are because we're being led by people who would rather retreat to corners than to step forward and lead. And so I think our generation taking more of the reins would help solve that in a major way.
Very cool. So for someone who maybe doesn't have the platform or the infrastructure to do this, what you guys do at IndyHub on a day-to-day basis, what one piece of advice would you give to that person if they're wanting to be someone that kind of acts personally on an individual level in their day-to-day life as a hub to get networking, build relationships? What one piece of advice?
My answer's simple: 3 cups of coffee. So, we use this idea of 3 cups of coffee at IndyHub, but it started for me. I remember, so Pete Buttigieg, who's now the Secretary of Transportation, many years ago was running for treasurer of the state of Indiana. And I met him for the first time, and he was young. I mean, at the time he was probably, 28 maybe? He may have even been younger than that. And I met him, and I was like, how are you doing this? I mean, running all over the state, young guy, how are you approaching this? And he told me, he's like, I have 3 cups of coffee in every place I go, and I ask those individuals to tell me 3 other people I need to meet.
Wow.
And as soon as I start hearing the same names, like I know I'm doing a good job.
Wow.
And I remember he told me that at the Elbow Room downtown, which is no longer there, but was a great bar when I first moved to the city. And we were up in the upstairs. It was a fundraiser event, and he shared that with me. And that stuck with me for a long time. And I think anybody can do that. Anybody can be the kind of
yes.
person who's looking for those 3 cups of coffee. And the hardest part is just making the ask, right?
Oh yeah.
You're sending the email, sending the message,
Yep.
Yeah.
sliding into the DM. I don't know, is that a thing
Yes,
they do?
yeah,
So
yeah.
is that different? I guess I misunderstand. But like whatever it takes to have that request, have those 3 cups of coffee.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you're so inclined, ask who else you should be talking to based on the things you're interested in. Because you're doing something really great there, which is helping to continue that 2 degrees of separation for our
Yeah,
city, right?
Definitely.
You're also helping to empower somebody else by sitting down with them and taking an interest. And then you yourself are growing because you're building a network. And there are a lot of folks who say they're in the networking business, right? Like they throw events and that's great. And I love everybody that's doing that because there's great value there. But I think what we bring to the table is networking with a purpose. It's a purpose for you personally. It's a purpose for our community as a whole, and it's a purpose for the future of this city.
Absolutely.
that.
So for people that are watching, listening, learning about you guys maybe for the first time ever, what ways can they get involved, help you guys out, learn more about you, or utilize your services?
Yeah, so the website's a great resource, www.indyhub.org. That's a great way to kind of just get a lay of the land on everything we've got going on. If you just want to reach out and say you want to get more connected, you want to get more involved, you can email us at hello@indyhub.org.
Very cool.
Also on the website, the Meet Indy stuff is easy to track down. You can take the survey, you start going through that process. So if you're like, yeah, I want to network with a purpose, but I'm a little nervous about that initial outreach, we'll take care of it for you. So reach
Very
out to us
cool.
and look up any of the members of the team are always happy to connect. I mean, I think all of us that do these jobs at IndyHub are doing it because we love Indianapolis and we love Indy's people, and we want to grow. We want to make sure that everyone has a place here and everyone feels a sense of belonging. So don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, and we'd be happy to help.
Very cool. Well, I think that's all I have. Thank you
is,
so
yeah.
much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for
It
having
was
me.
great to have your time and have your attention and just learn more about what you guys are doing, which is really, really cool.
Great. Thank
So,
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you guys for watching, tuning in to another episode of the Hustle Indy Show. We look forward to seeing you again in the next one.
Gotta believe for us.